Welcome back to Behind the Ballot, and we are now live for episode 9. We're going to
Yeah,
be
I think
talking
it is
about,
9. Yeah, I think it's
yeah,
9.
it is.
Already
Census
losing
shifts.
track.
Yeah, we're going to be covering the recent census shifts, tariff trimmers, and some global flashpoints and additional power plays at home. So there's been a lot of news since we last met Muhammad. A lot's been going on globally
Yeah,
and
we had to take a few day
domestically.
break, and a lot happened in that few day break.
And, just with everyone's lives get a little busy here and there, but we're always back here to give you and our listeners the best, informative, balanced, and accessible information on all topics relevant. So, starting first with some international news, looking at Israel and Gaza. So, last we were speaking. Israel just approved, the cabinet approved their on ground mission against Gaza to basically occupy Gaza. And I believe there have been reports as of today that have been stating that they are actually looking to have some of the Gaza population actually leave before the ground invasion starts. Now, I think that's just interesting in the sense how, you know, Israel is feeling that they have a mandate and a right for their vision of this greater Israel at the expense of, moving the Palestinian people. And we're seeing how we were
That's really
talking.
what it is.
It's really what it is. They think they have a mandate to be able to do this.
They think there's this one saying I like from I believe it's 1984. Everybody is equal. Some are just more equal than others. That's the exact kind of message the West is sending right now. We already know that the West kind of dehumanizes Muslims. It's been the go to scapegoat for ages because a lot of Christians in the West aren't familiar with Muslims. And now in Europe, there being a lot of Pakistanis and things such as that, which, fun fact, Pakistani men, I should say specifically, are some of the worst on average Muslim men. And I don't mean that just by high anecdotal evidence. The country that has the highest rates of domestic violence among their marriages is Pakistan. 85% of men hit their wives in Pakistan. It's not good. These people don't have respect. The men. I mean, and I knew a Pakistani woman, and she said like confirmed all that and more. She's like, yeah, there's a reason why I don't talk to Pakistani men, XYZ. And what we're really seeing is Israel is using that to its benefit as it has been in the past. Look at 9/11. All of a sudden, America didn't care for the Middle East Islam at all. 9/11 comes in, occurs. Osama bin Laden is framed as the United States' top terrorist target. And all of a sudden, Islam is seen as in this very evil light as like an enemy of the West and Christianity. And the thing is, in my opinion, that couldn't be further from the truth because most Muslims are just like most Christians. You know what I mean? Like if Christians were by the T, by the book, they'd be very similar to Sharia law Muslims because interest is banned in the Bible, completely banned in the Bible. But that's completely something that's completely okay in Western Christian civilizations,
Right,
even
right.
though it's outright banned in the Bible. And there's many things like that. And like for example, like premarital sex, you're only supposed to have sex with your, under the God wedded husband or wife. And why this, I think this is important, is that we have been through a secular government across most of the Western civilization. People have really been able to detach themselves from the religious identity of what exactly is in the book because there's a lot of interpretations that come from that. And a secular government allows people to come to their own interpretation. And that opens up a lot of possibility for a foreign actor or a mischievous actor to manipulate that viewscape into whatever they specifically want. And we
Yeah.
see that a lot with Israel and Christianity. The
Yep.
term Judeo Christian didn't exist until the 1900s. And this is all just something that we're seeing promoted by Israel and Zionists for to gain support for the idea of Christianity. When in fact, Israel is one of the largest enemies of Christianity, honestly. So it really makes me had to take out a deep breath there. So it really actually bothers me when I see so many Christians and such support Israel, because Israel discriminates against Christians within its own borders. It kills Christians that disagree with it. And
Yep.
even then, it even kills and sterilizes Jews that aren't the kind of Jews they want. You know what I mean?
And
Like
I mean,
looking at the
also,
Ethiopian Jews who they sterilize without their consent nor knowledge.
right, and they're also, innocently killing, journalists as well. I don't know if you earlier in the
Oh yeah, dude, it's horrible. It's
with Al Jabir. I'm probably destroying that name, but their whole
Al
journalist group,
Jazeera's.
yeah, Al Jazeera's, their whole group, eliminated by Israel in a strike. So
And
they are
something
taking
that
these steps to like try to, take out their, journalistic enemies, as well as forcing, their allies into these nonsensical wars that are
I mean,
for a mandated vision that he declares is his right to push forward.
yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Israel bans journalists from allowing come into the borders. Israel has killed more journalists than World War One and World War Two, the Vietnam War, and the Afghanistan War, Operation Desert Storm, and all that combined. So it's really in 2 years. In 2 years, they managed to kill more journalists than all those wars combined.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really pathetic and sad how much the West is sending this message of, oh, well, we know they're murdering people. We know they're starving people. We know they're committing war crimes. But because they're a democratic government, because they're one of us, we'll let it slide. And at that point, it really raises the question of, well, if you guys are allowing these inhumane, actions to occur simply because they're on your side, then this is completely on the table for everybody. You know what I mean? I mean, Putin and Xi Jinping, I'm probably butchering that. They said it very well. I mean, they said they both released two separate statements about this. They said like Putin said if Russia did even 20% to what Israel is doing to Gaza to Ukraine, they would have been completely demonized across the board. And it's true because Russia has killed 1/100th of the people that Israel has
Yep.
in more time. Meaning it's just more than what it's Russia is killing at less than 1% the rate of Israel, and in terms of innocent civilians, and it's just
Yeah, it's only gonna
ridiculous.
get it's only gonna get worse. Only
Only
gonna
going to get
get
worse, and it's
and
ridiculous that we're fed all this bullshit, to say it
oh
the most
god,
proper way, of how the Russians are so evil, how Putin's such a bad guy, and then we're told, oh well, Israel is just defending itself. You know what I mean? They're not doing anything wrong. There's a lot of terrorists around there. It's like your guys are feeding us this propaganda that Hamas is hiding in every single building with
yeah,
every single person, every single family member is Hamas, and then all of a sudden you expect us to want to continue to support this idea of Russia versus Ukraine. And I mean, it's an interesting thing because on the international level, I'm not sure if you saw this, Mikhail, but there's a proposed peace talk for both of these wars
yeah,
going on right now. And really, I mean, I think that a majority of the American people want both wars to be done.
without a
And
doubt.
more so importantly, they want our role in the wars to be done. So, for those who don't know, and Mikhail, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to add the details of the peace talks that have been going on. So, for the Russia and Ukraine situation, there's a talk between Putin and Trump scheduled for this Friday in Alaska. Interestingly enough, the cool state to do these in, regarding the peace deal for Ukraine, and it will involve land swapping. And what do you think about that,
Yeah,
MJ, Mikhail? Because I'm on the whole idea that, of course, there's going to be land swapping. I mean, it's the cold truth of life that might makes right. And even if you disagree with the whole notion of Ukraine giving up land, what are they going to do? What
I
are
mean,
we going to
also,
do? Do you want us to throw billions more dollars? This is not directly at
right
you.
though.
This is just like to the people who support the ideal. And it's just like, do they really want us to continue to send billions in weapons to a non-NATO country that we're not bound to in any way to support this whole ordeal? And I just want to ask you, what do you think about the idea of a land swap having to be done, a territorial exchange to Russia? And do you think that it's possible or likely that this peace talk between Russia and U.S. will lead to the end of the Ukraine war?
So to answer the first part, I do believe that an actual land swap is actually probably the only necessary and the only meaningful way to end the war
Yeah.
without there being further casualties. But this is also, you know, the precedent was already set with Crimea with Russia. They got that. Now they're going to have even more land of Ukraine.
Yeah.
So this is twice now that two different presidents as well, that they have showed their strength overwhelmingly. And, the president was thinking that they were going to be tough, but still conceded in giving them that land. So I think this is going to push Russia to further encroach on other states and other countries around them. It's going to be dangerous for how the future is going to be globally if, obviously, depending on the size of the mass within Ukraine is given to Russia. Because even in Ukraine, the support for the war is down.
Completely
So
down. They
you're going
want
to
to see too.
see possibly, new leadership within Ukraine and Zelensky being ousted. And, it's completely his fault in a way. I mean, I
I agree.
understand that as the United States, we viewed Ukraine as kind of our bunker of safety that we had against Russia in certain areas. Weren't a NATO ally, as Mohammed said, but still overall, an ally who we used to, deter anything that was coming from Russia or any buildup from Russia.
And
So,
just to add to what you just said there, Mikhail, a big reason why this war even started was because Europe was trying to get Ukraine NATO membership, and Russia
exactly,
specifically said, "We do not want that on our doorstep. If you try to give Ukraine membership, we will invade, take land from it," which is exactly what happened.
exactly what happened.
And so it could be seen both ways. I know there's been Europe has been trying to say, well, if Ukraine's going to give up land, we want it on the exchange that Ukraine will join NATO. And Russia's like, that's exactly why we started this all. Do you
Yeah, and
really think
Russia
we'll
has a
agree to
point.
that?
They are basically surrounded by all NATO countries. So
Yeah.
it's only right for them to, wanting to have this piece of land and wanting to make, their, aggressive strides that they made against Crimea and, dwindling down now, hopefully, with the talks. And you said, where is it
In
going to be placed?
Alaska.
In Alaska? Yeah, in Alaska
Alaska.
this Friday. Hopefully deters, everything. And that's Russia, getting two wins out of the United States and, expanding its borders overall.
I mean, honestly, it'll be interesting to see because don't forget the USSR, the Soviet Union, had far larger borders than Russia had until it underwent a great deal of civil unrest and the collapse of the Soviet Union. So even if I will say Russia does extend itself, and I think they've learned their lesson from the Soviet Union days, but it is still very possible that a civil war not a civil war, but a civil unrest where the country breaks up in different ways can occur. Whether it will, I think is just speculative, honestly. But Crimea overwhelmingly voted to join Russia,
Yeah.
overwhelmingly. So
Hmm.
as it stands right now, Russian civilians, while they may not agree with Putin, they agree with the idea of being Russia. We've seen nationalism really uptick a lot across the entire world, where people are just very proud of their country in various ways. And I think Russia, while a lot of people may be how do I say this? Not happy with the war that's going on right now.
Right.
At the end of the day, people are just happy for a stable life where they're not being massively displaced or threatened with a loss of that lifestyle. And I think it's interesting to see what these peace talks will lead to. And I really don't think that this first peace talk will lead to peace. But I do think, honestly, that Trump's more on the side of, I want to get this done with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Have it as another win. I mean, I would too at this point. It's been going on for far too long.
Especially
Far too
since he
much money has been
campaigned on
spent.
literally ending that war.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, he, over exaggerated how quick he would get it done. But I mean, this is a peaceful way to get it done.
He said he'd get it
Unfortunately,
done
there's going to
before he
be
even became president. I'm sorry. That's
right.
just so
Yeah.
funny to me.
No, yeah, that's hilarious. It's just speaks to like kind of like how he talks on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Ukraine, unfortunately, they're going to be losing, parts of their country, and I'm also going to be wondering, like, is this going to start now more pockets and more of Russia like encroaching, putting in propaganda pieces and going out further from the land they have from Ukraine, trying to even possibly go for
I'm
more within the next like 2 to 3 years, which I mean, let's just say 5 to 10 years, which we have seen.
I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see. I know the big reason why Russia wanted to invade Ukraine when they were touted the possibility of joining NATO was because they wanted access to the Western Seas and a
Yeah,
warm seaport, as they call it, so they would have access to that naval possibility for trading and more. Damn. So I do think that if Russia were to try to gain more land, it'll be more of a culture war, where they just try to gain the support of the people of that land.
right,
There's a lot of people in Eastern Europe who sympathize with Russia. And it's the reason being isn't because these people love Putin or things like that, but it's just that the Slavic identity is very present in a lot of Eastern Europe. And I don't think it'll be surprising if other countries do, or other, I shouldn't say countries, other pieces of land where people live or other people are interested in joining Russia like Crimea did. But I don't think that Russia would invade militaristically like we've seen with Ukraine. And I think the sole reason, unless it's the same situation where that country is threatened with NATO membership, which in the end, since Crimea was voted to join Russia on their own accord, I think it was a bit of the Europe's fault for doing
yeah,
that threat,
oh yeah, without a
honestly.
doubt, they sparked the wood that was already there getting ready to burn from Russia wanting to you know have no other countries next to them be
Yeah, like imagine if
with NATO,
Taiwan
which
said
makes so
like
much more sense.
yeah, imagine if like Taiwan wanted to vote to join China, like officially. And we said, no, we're not gonna let that happen. I mean, Taiwan's now joining NATO for some reason, even though they've never been in NATO.
Right,
They and don't get me wrong, a lot of people say, well, Ukraine is in Europe, this should be in NATO. There is quite a jump. If you look at the geographical map of Europe, there's quite a jump from member states of NATO over Eastern Europe to get to Ukraine. There's quite a bit of Eastern European states that aren't in NATO.
right. No, no,
So,
no. Not
and
every
Ukraine,
country is within NATO, within the European Baltic, region at all.
yeah, not by any means. Like Serbia, for example, isn't in
Right,
NATO. They have quite the bad history with NATO, actually, and they're a big Russian ally. So it's just important to note that the idea of, while we in the West are very comfortable and exposed to the idea of Europe is NATO XYZ, Eastern Europe and Western Europe are quite literally almost two different worlds. So it's important that we understand that when it comes to geopolitics and what people vote for, Western Europe doesn't like Russia because of World War II and so on. Eastern Europe is very indifferent to Russia, especially compared to the West. When they think of Russia, they prefer Russia over Western Europe almost every single time. And I want to segue that into the talking about the possible Israel Gaza peace deal, Israel Palestine peace deal.
yeah,
They So what has been going talked about that right now is that I believe Trump was going to meet with Netanyahu and Hamas, the
yeah,
leadership in Egypt, and they were going to talk about employing 60 plus thousand Egypt, Lebanon, and Saudi Arabian soldiers to the Palestinian borders to establish a police state while Palestine then sets itself up and gets a government going on. Now, I would be optimistic about that,
I would
but
say.
I I think most people are leaning towards the idea that Netanyahu just wants to literally get rid of everybody there, and
Yeah,
he won't take anything else as an option. What do you think, Mikhail?
I don't think he's taking anything less than getting them out, without an option. As
Yeah,
Greater Israel is what he wants, and Trump's letting him get it. Um, it's honestly dangerous, and it's just gonna continue. Greater Israel is going to be a thing within the next 20, 30, 40 years, no matter how long it takes, because Netanyahu is so driven by it, and he's getting the wins realistically.
I mean it's crazy how much most of the Israeli public quite literally supports it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they support it by far. I mean, you saw the corruption trial was going; they got rid of that attorney, so
Yeah,
they aren't far from taking tactics to protect him, so that they can have this greater Israel. It's going to be a huge play in the future, and especially having Israel there, having Russia gaining more, having China being more protective over Taiwan. On a global scale, things are getting to a ticking place. I would say. What would you say, Mohammed?
I mean, I think that there's a saying that I like, and in some weeks decades happen, and decades only weeks happen. And I think we're at the point where we're in the situation where in weeks decades happen. Then we're seeing a
Yeah,
lot
pretty much.
happen. I am hopeful that China doesn't move on Taiwan. You know, I think they are just keeping the possibility open with the fact that everything's going on. USA is stretched out and weak with economic issues, and also stretched out between Israel and Ukraine with their own weapons being set out for them. And I do think they're considering it, but you know, every few years you hear about it, so I wouldn't expect China to do it during the Trump presidency. Now, and you know, if I get wrong, I gladly admit I was wrong. I'm not one of those people who are just going to sit down and be like, try to double down on my incorrect statement.
Right.
But I do think that the this feels like the climax almost of the Gaza Palestine war, and also the Ukraine Russia war, because we've seen Russia push further into Ukraine, and Ukraine really just is can't stand a chance at the
No,
moment.
they can't stand a chance at all. If it wasn't for us, they would have faltered within a year or less easily.
Oh yeah, they just simply don't have the equipment, they don't have the numbers, they don't have anything capable of stopping Russia.
Hmm.
So, you know, it's been very hopeful. And, you know, I was listening to Breaking Points earlier, and they made an interesting point, and I want to hear what you think about it. They said that even if somebody were to completely stop the Ukraine war, that they, because so many people on the right and on the left are so pro Ukraine, like the people on the left, because they just hate Russia and think that people who incite wars are bad. And then people on the right who are just, you know, in the idea that Russia is the enemy and whatever they do is wrong. They said that whichever politician on either side were to push for the idea of actually ending the war, they get a lot of pushback either way, because the majority of Ukraine Americans support Ukraine in the Russia war. So if
Right.
there were to be a peace deal that involved giving up Ukrainian land, it would be a blowback to that president's, you know, grandstanding and popularity. But I really do think that, similar to the Afghanistan war, this will literally blow over in a few months. Like, people be
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Oh my god, this is bad," and then they realize it quite literally doesn't affect them at all, and they just go
Hmm.
on.
And also, quite literally, nothing else would have happened besides this deal, or
Yeah,
nothing else would have continued besides the war. More individuals dying, more of Zelensky crying, not crying, but wanting to use our tax dollars for weapons and things of that nature. Us keeping to continue to fuel their war machine is not what we want to continue to do
especially with how
as
much we're
Americans across
spending
the
today.
board. Like it's so much money that we're exporting them, billions and billions and billions of dollars
Yeah, to
that
Russia
they
and
keep
Ukraine,
here in the United States.
to Ukraine and Israel in 2024 alone, we sent them nearly $30 billion,
Exactly.
and that's more than I think every single other country in the next like 25 top eight combined.
And a lot of
So
it's not accounted for either.
yeah, it's just that. And the thing
Proportions.
is, the argument that I hate the most about this is, oh, well, we give them our money and then they just buy our weapons with it. So it kind of balances out. And I went over this in the other episode, but that just quite literally means they're forcibly taking working class taxpayer dollars and then giving them to like the people who run Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin and all that crazy shit.
Hmm.
So it's really just like, so you want me to support you guys taxing the poor and the working class to give to the rich, and then you're going to use this defense sector being boosted up economically as a reason for that. And I think it's a ridiculous argument. I really do. Because, you know, as I keep saying in these podcasts, the stock market is a horrible indication of economic health.
Yeah.
Just because Lockheed Martin had doubled the revenue earnings than what they were projected to, doesn't mean you're going to be better off. And I really think that the best solution is to just end it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And unlike why I think the Ukraine Russia war is different than the Israel Palestine war is because Israel has direct influence over American politics massively. And we can use this to talk about one of the things that we're going to talk about today, the DEI programs only for Jewish people. So, for those who haven't been in the loop, and it's quite literally ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
A lot of the Ivy League and major schools have been forced by Trump to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in reparations to Jewish students for emotional trauma endured by anti Semitic beliefs and actions on campus.
yeah,
And as we all know, Trump and them have pushed massively against DEI, saying that it's all about people being unqualified and being given opportunity they never would have earned otherwise, which is for the most part false, except for affirmative action. But that's another argument for another day.
right.
But the point being is that he is forcing these colleges to build up programs quite literally to cater to Jewish students.
Yep,
The whole DEI that he was arguing about, he is now proposing and fighting for Jewish Americans and Israelis who come into the land.
quite literally, and he's forcing, basically forcing institutions to bend the knee, and they are. And, with this lawsuit, it's honestly just insane. Just not
Crazy.
full grants for everything else, but except for Jewish DEI
And
program.
how this relates to the Israel-Palestine war and why it's different than the Ukraine-Russia one is if we had all of our politicians having to go to Moscow and like put their hand on the Kremlin and kiss the Kremlin, we'd be thinking, why the hell do our politicians have such an allegiance to Russia? Like, what? This is strange. This is nonsense. So when we've got leaders going to Israel and kissing the retaining wall of the Second Temple, not even a wall of the Second Temple, they're thinking, well, why simply put, why? And we can see with Trump's policies and a lot of the things that the DOJ has been doing that they do favor Jewish policy, Jewish favorability over everybody
By
else.
far, by far.
And that's going to cause a big issue for a lot of Jewish folk, because a lot of Jewish Americans don't support Israel's actions. I mean, we've seen that with how Mamdani and the Jewish capital of America, New York City, has a majority Jewish support despite being very critical of Israel's actions and calling them genocide. Now, the Jewish Americans are very different than the Israelis. The Israelis are living under the whole a lie that they're the chosen ones who can and should
Right.
murder and ethnically cleanse everybody who stands in their way. 81% of Israelis think that the famine in Gaza, that's starving people and killing them, isn't their concern, or really isn't a concern. If literally people from 50 miles, if people in West Virginia were starving, I'd feel pretty bad about that. You know what I mean? I think, well, we should do something for the people of West Virginia. That's how close, and I'm in Maryland. And that's how close Israel is to Gaza, even closer. So these Israelis really just view these people as underneath them, as people who aren't them, as pathetic. I mean, we've seen them spin on Christians. We've seen them slur and attack Christians and Muslims. We've seen them bomb churches and mosques, and it's ridiculous. So when we have these people who in America tout these Christian values and then support Israel, and then come out with all these extremely favorable to Jewish American ideologies and actions. The thought is really, why are we supporting Israel? Because there's really two strong camps in that regard now. There's the left camp, which is extremely against the crimes against humanity that Israel is committing. And then there's a camp on the right who's extremely angry about the influence Israel has on America. And so, with all that said, we do know that Trump is essentially in bed with Israel favorable policies. And I want to ask you, Mikhail, do you think it's because of the possibility of them having dirt on him with Epstein, or do you think this is just Trump being an old boomer American politician who thinks that we should help Israel no matter what?
Um, I would think both scenarios rolled into one in a sense. I mean, it's not like he's the only president that has always bent the knee to Israel. I mean,
I think literally the
Biden
last
tried to
four,
be a
including him,
little
have all kissed
tough.
the
Like
wall.
I was gonna say, like Biden tried to be a little tough, but he still sent weapons and let the war in Ukraine continue as it did and so forth. So it's not like he's a unique out of the bunch. Has he been giving a lot more in a sense? Yes, because a lot more has happened throughout his terms when he's been in office. But yeah, I mean, every U.S. president is pretty much beholden to Israel besides JFK, and as you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been effectively speaking and standing up for herself against the AIPAC and all that they do. I did see a video with Matt Gates. He was saying he was at an event and he walked into his hotel room and there was a an APAC individual there posing as a hotel worker with no
Yeah, I
clipboard,
read about that.
saying he was taking and the individual was taking inventory, had no clipboard or nothing that someone doing that would have. So that just shows just how entrenched and how they force, whether it's the Senate, the Senate, the representatives, or the president, or the staff themselves. They're all pressured to be beholden to Israel, and it's something we're going to continuously see. But it's also something that we're seeing dwindle within American sentiment, and that's going to
Oh,
change
massively,
how
massively.
individuals that are running for office within the next 3, 4 cycles are going to have to position themselves carefully when speaking about Israel and future endeavors that they do try to, crusade across the Middle East throughout those years. It's going to be very interesting, and I think potentially dangerous for us to be in bed with them so deeply and so deeply tied, because you have other countries as well who aren't that really supportive of Israel themselves.
Yeah,
So
it's I mean it's
they
all among the
isolate
West. The
themselves.
West is the sole reason Israel's even able to get away with what it does. We're supposed to be the group that upholds justice compared to the immoral Russia and China. But yet here we are allowing ethnic cleansing and genocide to go on like it's nothing while we actively support it. And I really think that, that's just drawing a clear line in people's heads.
Yep.
And I do think as well, I agree with you that this massive support by Israel by a lot of these politicians. I mean, we've even seen the Democrats, a group of Democrats and a group of Republicans go on a field trip to
Yeah.
Israel, a propaganda trip to
It's
Israel.
probably the first thing that's sent to them to get put on their calendars when they're freshmen. Their
Honestly, no,
first
I
elective. It's easily got to be. It's easily
easily,
got to be.
easily. And I mean, I would honestly love to see how many congressmen have gone on that propaganda trip to Israel.
I would love to see the numbers too. Maybe
They
that's something we can probably touch on the next episode, the episode after that. So our next episode is something special. But just tying back in a little bit to get to our domestic economic news, um, I really do think that China could be making a move towards Taiwan sooner than we really actually think.
what makes you think that?
I think it's going to be a 2027 situation, to be honest. I think what's going on now with the whole semiconductor and chip scenario, that's going to branch off into other economic avenues that are going to put China and the United States at more of a aggressive forefront. And not to mention, when Biden was in office, they passed the CHIPS Act, which I believe Pelosi was over in, or there was a delegation over in Taiwan, and China was actually having destroyers like around, circling around the island itself.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be something that we see perpetuate throughout these next 2 years. And I really do think they are gonna go for it because most recently going into our domestic economic news, President Trump announced a 100% tariff on important semiconductors and chips not manufactured in the United States. So that's going to be a huge hit for China, which is a huge market for those chips.
But it's
So
important to note that he did just extend again
yeah, the
the
China
their deadline
tariffs.
on them.
Yeah, that's going to keep happening and happening probably
Mhm.
until something major to where he's like, all right, they're going down. Um, but it's also interesting the maneuvers that he's doing with this 100% tariff on the chips being sold outside of the United States. He's also doing a 15% sale back from the video to the United States, actually. So
So that's
that
actually
is
really interesting because
extremely interesting.
that's on the B20 chips. The
Yes.
B20 chips, Nvidia has just run into a massive issue selling them because for China and China companies were their primary customer for those. And China just
Just
ordered the companies to stop
stop.
ordering them over
Exactly.
security issues
Yep.
related to them. So now Nvidia was planning tens of billions in estimated revenue for these sales, chip sales. And the US thought, hey, well, it makes sense if we can get 15% of that 30, 40 billion you guys got planned, that'll bring us in billions of revenue and we'll let you do what you want to do. And we've seen this happen with Apple as well, where they give Apple and Nvidia preferential treatment in the tariff market, the trade market.
Definitely say. Don't
Be-
forget they got they both Nvidia and Apple
yeah.
received exemptions after pledging and more investments into the United States. So I think, do you remember that thread that I sent you about Mark Cuban and how he was kind of explaining it? This is kind of what the Democrats have always kind of wanted in a sense.
Oh yeah, the Democrats just don't know how to tax people
Just don't know
properly
how
or
to
get
tax it.
revenue.
This, even though it does like constitutionally, actually it's unconstitutional what he's technically
Yeah.
doing on to a certain basis because you can't because you can't export licenses or things of that nature for revenue purposes, I believe. But it is an interesting way to drive revenue and also where you get incentive on both sides of the aisle. You get an incentive from the government. You have to pay these tariffs. You're exempt from them, but now you're investing into us. But we're also going to get that 15% as well from getting you off the hook from these tariffs. So the Democrats can definitely think of other strategic ways to pull in other companies and maybe take the foot off the gas on overtaxing billionaires and millionaires and things of that nature, and start to bring that rhetoric down, and now start going for the actual businesses themselves in a sense and how much revenue that they make. I mean, it's something that almost every socialist or progressive Democrat really talks about. They talk about the amount of billions and almost trillions of dollars these companies are making. Why not put your hand out, have a handshake, have a conversation smart enough to be able to not scratch each other's back, but make a fair partnership to where we're getting revenue and you're pulling in investments, getting jobs, and expanding your operations within the United States and not across the globe. So I think he's doing a very smart move here, and I think this is also, as I've been saying, what he's been doing is laying a lot of precedents down for someone to come in and really like put all this together in a nice packaged way.
Yeah.
Realistically, he's doing a lot of things that the next president is going to be able to do when it comes to negotiating with other countries and also now with companies as well.
It'll be interesting to see. Damn, I know there's one tax that Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders were pushing out that didn't get traction among the Democrats, and it's because I think the Democrats are just stupid when it comes to taxes, and that
Yeah,
was the
very much.
VAT, the value added tax. So the whole point of the VAT is very common across Europe and many other countries, even China, I believe. Actually, what the VAT is a tax along the entire process of the item. So say it's like a 15% VAT, and the whole chip making process for those B20s would be taxed 15% along the way, every step, and they would have to pay tax on that. And then generally they just pass the tax on to the consumer. But who's buying the B20 chips? China, and I mean these massive companies, not not consumers, these massive billionaire corporations. So why does it matter if we implement the VAT tax on them? And it doesn't. Bernie Sanders and Yang's plan both specified VAT on luxury items, or just items that are more expensive than what the normal consumer buys.
Yeah.
So things like Ferraris, boats, yachts, like high scale boats. I shouldn't say, so a lot of boats are just more normal. They have high scale boats, yachts, high grade chips. Then not like the GPUs for like the Nvidias. I mean the RTX 5020, 5040s or things like that. But the B20s that are sent to these corporations. So it is I do agree that it is nice to see more revenue peeled in from different areas composed to the
Right.
normal, oh, we should just increase income tax.
Right.
Oh, we should increase capital
Tax.
gains
Yeah, the
tax.
regular tax and spend liberal. Trump is looking at this in a completely different way, and this is kind of what is gonna kind of like what I was saying, like the precedent level, because you even saw where JD Vance was speaking at over this week. He was saying that it's going to get to a point where there's a merge between public and privatization of enterprise within the United States, and this is almost the start of that in a certain way. So I think this is going to be something that you're going to see more and more of probably throughout the rest of his term, and as well for whether it's a Democrat or Republican that comes in, because now they have somewhat of a playbook to be able to pull in those revenues and not force companies to let me get 15% or more, but try to bring them to bend the knee and bring additional revenues to the United States, as well as bring additional jobs from American countries, not have them go across the seas, where it's been killing a lot of Americans in the manufacturing industry.
It'll be interesting to see. I do think that this is the thing. Tariffs and other taxes such as that are largely used to protect domestic output, but it's very difficult to weigh that properly in a developed nation while also not mitigating while mitigating the damage to the consumer, because the studies show, based off what companies have been doing in the past 6 months while Trump's been president with the tariffs, is that 22% pass on the cost of the consumer and 59% of the companies decide to take it. But it was shown that in amongst the next year, 79% of companies plan on passing the cost on to the consumer because they just cannot continue to take those hits without accommodating for it. And there's really not a massive amount of profit margin for most companies. You know what I mean? You all of a sudden have a 10% hit to your margin rate, and you're thinking, well, what the heck can we do to fix this? You know what I mean? And generally, it comes with, well, if we can pass down that cost to the consumer, it'll fix it. And the one who comes out the bottom of it is us. And what I think is important to know with these tariffs, while NVIDIA and Apple, and also the Taiwanese State Manufacturing Corporation, which
Yes.
is the lead chip maker in the world, they also got a tariff reduction to zero because they're the big dogs. And this has really been what a lot of people have been warning about and talking about Trump being an oligopolist, really touting an oligarchy. There being some rich individuals who have influence with the direct executive branch and the president to get whatever they want for the most part, and everybody else just suffers. And tariffs in this deal really just hurt the middle guys and the little guys more than anything else. Yes, the big companies are important to the American economy, but the middle companies and the small companies hire more than 70% of the American workforce, 75%, more than 75% of the American workforce. So when the companies that hire most Americans are suffering financially and can't recoup the losses because the big dogs are now cheaper selling their goods because they're getting exclusions and the little guys aren't, and they can't recoup those losses. So then they fire people because they just can't afford the people, and it just goes on to a further economic collapse with people not having enough money to pay their rent, get groceries, XYZ. It's really going to lead to a strong down point in the market. Now, I know in the last episode we talked about, I mentioned that I don't think this crash, the upcoming crash, because it'll be largely based off the AI bubble, would
Yeah.
be too large of an impact on the middle class and the working class, like the .com bubble. But I do think if Trump keeps up these tariffs and keeps specifically giving exclusions for the top 10 companies in America, while every other company suffers from it, I do think we'll start seeing a lot of hard, bad losses across the economy, with people getting fired, people losing their jobs, not being able to afford a mortgage and such. And speaking of that, we just saw a new Bureau of Labor Statistics
Oh yes.
chief recommended by Trump, who specifically on the first day said he thinks they should stop putting out numbers in general. So it just seems like they know what's going to happen,
Right. They're
and they're
trying to
just
hide it.
preparing for the damage control.
Right. Trying to you know get their word out before the numbers are out, and a public narrative can be put on it besides theirs. It's going to be um, terrible to see what our economy is going to be looking like as these tariffs
Oh yeah.
continue, and as individuals aren't able to pay for essentials. Grocery costs are rising across America. It's getting harder to buy simple things. These tariffs, as you're saying, going to be, starting to really mostly hit next year. A lot of things financially are going to be hitting next year for
Oh
individuals.
yeah,
Medicare is going to be gone. All those supports that are in that big, beautiful bill will be stripped away in 2026 on top of these tariffs tumbling down as well. So it's going to be a lot harder within the coming months and year. But I do hopefully believe that, with Trump, and as he speaks, as he thinks he's an economic genius, that he's able
he
to,
thinks, yeah.
exactly, like, hopefully he's able to, um, have a parachute of some kind to be able to save us, so that we have a nice soft landing within, as we can get to, 2027. I know 2026 is going to be a rough year, even within
I think
New
2027
Jersey.
is gonna be
Like,
rough too.
they were talking about the budget was going to be bad, and that's going to be across many multiple states as well. That their budgets for next year are going to be a lot worse, and I'm sure multiple states are, going to be pulling back their legislators and, for other sessions, to speak about the federal cuts that are going to be coming as well. So we're going to be keeping our ear to the ground on that without a doubt, because that's going to be monumental when it hits. Honestly, I believe it's going to be, something that every American thinks that they know it's going to get ready to happen, but when it actually, impacts and the full effect is there, it's going to be, traumatizing in a sense. What do you think?
I don't think it'll be pretty. I do
No,
think that
not at
I
all.
think that if Trump keeps up the tariff game, keeps restricting a lot of these mid-size and small size and mom and pop companies, that it will lead to a lot of job loss across the board. And I
I was
think
going to
that's
say,
part
it
of the
even
reason why they're making this move with cutting job number reports is because they know a lot of jobs are about to be lost.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't it even say that, Washington Post, or maybe, New York Post, had stated that the scheme of these tariffs was to actually benefit, Trump's, favorited companies, basically. I don't know if you
And
saw that report,
I
but,
read I read a bit of the report. I didn't read the whole thing.
yeah, it's. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all, and
Doesn't
it shows
surprise
that.
me either.
Think about how I mean, Tim Cook gave him that, we'll call it medallion, not a medallion. I forget what he even
Bro,
gave. It was
gold
like
bar is the
a gold
closest
bar and
thing to
yeah,
call it.
plaque. Yeah, it was. But then you have, New Jersey Senator Menendez going to jail for almost basically the same exact thing. So
Yeah,
it's
no.
like, yeah, he got the $600 billion deal, but, in almost exchange, exemptions, and now Trump has, a bar of gold sitting on his desk, if anything.
Yeah, no, literally, like that's how you can save your company billions of dollars. Is just give Trump a gold bar and tell him that you'll give him more money
Right. And imagine when a Democrat, gets in office next term,
and
next
starts doing
presidential
that
term.
shit. The Republicans will cry like crazy, and that's
Just,
the thing. I mean,
and that's
I
the
don't.
most dangerous part. That's why I really don't like what he's doing. It's smart in certain ways, in certain areas, but I always like to think about, like, okay, I'm doing these things. So now whatever you've done in your 4 8 years, you know, the next person is going to be able to look at and say, look what he did. I can basically almost do the same exact stuff. Like, it's
Especially with
not
the immunity the Supreme Court gives the president.
exactly.
I
So
mean,
now all those
basically,
acts
whatever
are
the
basically out
president
of
does is
order.
legal,
Exactly. Cannot be tried on those acts if they were done within his years of duty. So
which is
that's going to be,
crazy to me. Which
yeah,
is
yeah, very
crazy to
crazy.
me.
That's, one of the many Supreme Court cases that the Supreme Court has definitely gotten wrong. Almost, another one that they're looking to get wrong as well. Terribly enough, they're actually looking to, there was a petition filed, should I say, to have the, same-sex marriage case relooked at by the Supreme Court. Now, that is something that, so a petition can be made to the Supreme Court. It's relooking at the case that established same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
So basically, a lot of petitions really don't get picked up by the Supreme Court, but I think this one in particular is really getting a lot of, attention towards it, just given it's dealing with same-sex marriage and a not really a high priority issue, but a high culture issue within the United States. So it's going to be hard if it is, overturned. A lot of states, 35 states actually, it would get banned in overnight once it got overturned. So, states would have to retroactively, put their own laws in place. And now you're also like, this is another diminish of further rights within the United States, and further supports for minority populations in the sense that Democrats are and need to be more champions of when they're putting out their messaging and so forth.
I
I feel like
mean,
not hitting on those topics is kind of a no-brainer because it's the Supreme Court. And those decisions are everlasting until there is a justice that retires, or
yeah,
they go the FDR route and try to expand the court.
the FDR route's always an interesting one.
Yeah, it's always a very
The
interesting
It's
one.
like going off the grid in that one Rick and Morty episode.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, like, oh, what you mean everyone's only done 2 terms? I'll go 4 and then die. Damn. But what blows my mind the most about all this gay marriage stuff is that the United States saying they'll recognize gay marriage isn't like an NUA saying we support gay marriage.
Exactly.
It's just saying, all right, well, we just want to understand what you will be doing for tax and, yeah, asset implications.
Exactly.
Like, it's not like it's the U.S. government is a church spot endorsed government. It's not like the church is saying gay marriage is okay. If you don't like gay marriage, that's fine. If you don't like gay people, that's your problem. If you're gay, then that's your problem. If you're straight, that's your problem. The whole point being, this is a country where if you're not doing something that's bothering other people, you should be free to do it.
Exactly.
And if you have 2 consenting adults, gay or straight or not, that want
Shouldn't
to say,
matter.
well, let's get married, you should be able to just sign the form to the government that shows that, so for tax reasons. You know what I mean? And that's what bothers me the most about this is that if they're just gay marriage isn't that big of a deal for legal reasons. It
No, it's really
really
not.
isn't. It literally just isn't. You know what I mean? I can't even stress that out enough. Like, nothing changes. Nothing has changed. I can see the argument from people that say, like the people on like the left has gone too far for pro LGBT. That was one of the 3 big reasons why Kamala Harris lost was
Yeah, which is
because
that's understandable and that's a
that's
valid statement
understandable.
going too far. But that same-sex marriage was just the beginning of it, and I think that's a fair enough standard that should be left in place. There's no reason to peel back that law that's been in standing for about a little over a decade, just about. So I don't
Decade
think
plus.
it's a decade plus, just about. So it's I feel like it's no use to really take it out. I feel like this is just another conservative tactic to try to the MAGA Trump base to get them back and rejuvenating exactly what MAGA stands for in a sense and going back to that make America great again, how ever that's described in their
Aggressive
rhetoric, even
nostalgia.
currently now. So it's ridiculous that they're even looking at this. We're definitely going to be keeping our eyes out for if they do pick it up because as I said, petitions are something that anyone can really send to the Supreme Court, and it's something that the Supreme Court doesn't often take for cases, but it's not something that hasn't happened throughout the Supreme Court's history. So I
Yeah.
do expect for them to, without a doubt, take up same-sex marriage, but probably after the 2026 midterms, because if they do it before, it would be a complete bloodbath for the Republican Party if that were the case
Yeah.
across the board. Because then would that now then make individuals who live in a state that has it banned once it's overturned, their marriage is now null and void.
What are the
So
tax
like it's
implications
like
for
yeah
that?
exactly exactly how do you divest or do certain things to split and not have that tax benefit anymore. So it's like they really have to think this through in a sense, and I don't think it's meritable to go after this. I think you just leave it the way it is, the Democrats, pushing and expanding it, they obviously need to reel back because they lost the last presidential election because of them emphasizing that across the nation, across the voters who did not have stomach for it. So the Supreme Court is going to be looking at also uh, the census as well, Muhammad, as we talked about. I think we talked. We might have talked. I'm not sure. We might have talked about the census changes that Trump is trying to do. Actually, so he's trying to
Yeah,
actually not have
we have
illegal
not mentioned
immigrants.
it too much. We talked a little bit about it on the last episode and how it's unconstitutional, but there's been a little bit of an update on it.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's honestly, I really don't know how I sit with it in a sense because like I feel like that it's meritable, but as I was saying, you know, prison gerrymandering is another issue that needs to be looked at as well.
yeah,
It's not
and
just
this is the thing. They
not
I was seeing some funny reports about how in 2020 the census undercounted red states and overcounted blue states, and JD Vance even had like a interview where he was like talking about that. And I'm like, dude, your boss was the president then.
right.
Like if you're gonna blame somebody, blame him. You know what I mean? And it just really goes to show how much the political game is just finger pointing and shifting the blame from one situation to one person to the other.
Yep.
I mean, in all regard, you could easily blame Trump for the census in 2020 and the undercounting because he was president. But with enough smoke and mirrors, all of a sudden it's the Democrats' fault that that happened in the first place, and it was because they were plotting against the red states,
Right.
and
And
not the
also,
fact that
he
what'd
did
you say?
try he tried in 2020. If you don't, I mean not in 2020, but in his first term, if you don't remember the citizenship question
Yeah, I know, and
on
the
the
Supreme Court
yeah.
shot
So
it
like
down.
yeah, so the Supreme Court shot that down. So there is some faith of them possibly upholding this if it does make it all the way up there, or even if it's necessary that it needs to go through that route either. But
I
yeah,
mean,
it's going to be it's 14th Amendment that I think most likely would obviously be what it would violate and be unconstitutional towards. So
yeah,
hopefully the Supreme Court, they do have to pick this up. They do not uphold this law whatsoever.
yeah, no, whatsoever. For those who aren't aware, we talked about last episode. The reason why the change that Trump wants to make to the census is unconstitutional is because the census in the 14th Amendment requires that it to just account every single person in the states except for non-tax paying native Indians. So that means even if you're an illegal, as long as you're in the state, as long as you're paying taxes and not Indian, both
Gets
those
me counted.
things, you're going to get counted in the census. And I mean, you can argue that, we shouldn't do that, but then you're also arguing that we should amend the Constitution,
Exactly.
which is not going to get the 2/3 support that it requires to do so. No,
No,
no
no,
chance.
no, no, no.
And I do think that I agree with you. If it were to go to Supreme Court, I'd be amazed. The Supreme Court has amazed me, of course, in the last few
Yes, they
years.
have.
But I'd be amazed if they were to say, "Yep, this is legal." It's blatantly unconstitutional, and I don't
Oh,
think
mainly
that I
unconstitutional.
don't think there's going to be a midterm census. I think that's physically impossible, and it's just a lot of planning that they can't do by the time the year's over, or by the time even
Well,
2026 is over.
Texas has passed the map, so we'll see what happens. And
That
Gavin,
is an
he
interesting
did.
thing. So let's segue into that. So
Yeah,
Texas and their gerrymandering map. You want to take it away from here, Mikhail? Go over what's been going on.
yeah. So Texas passed their map. They're +5 new district map for Texas itself. They actually got all the Texas Democrats to come back. I actually saw that Democrats were happy that they got so much attention towards this issue that now they were fine enough with it to go back and actually vote on it because Gavin Newsom actually tweeted out and also sent to Trump a threat letter, if you want to call it, basically
Yeah.
stating if Texas does go forward with this, California will be doing the same thing expeditiously. So, Texas has passed it. So I am very much looking to see that, California is going to be following in those same steps. And we'll
Yeah.
have other states following in those same steps too. JD Vance went to Indiana. They're also looking at it now. I believe Colorado is looking at it. New York's looking at it. New Jersey was looking at it. All different states are looking at it. So it's going to be interesting to see if they actually fully implement and also if these maps are successfully passed as well. Like
Yeah.
there could like there's obviously these threats and so forth, but it still has to pass regardless or go through the correct measures that are lined out within each state's constitution. Because I was saying some are with through commissions, and some are actually have to be through court orders as well. So depending upon the procedure that they have to go through, will really determine how quickly they can get it done. Just like in New York, the governor is trying to get rid of the independent commission. Actually,
Just trying to amend it entirely.
yeah, just amend it entirely. Which I mean, Republicans started this in a sense, but I say the starting as starting the fight. But
In the
however,
modern fight, they
yeah, the
started the
modern
current
fight, I would
fight.
say, yeah, the modern fight, without a doubt. But this is something that Republicans have had to deal with for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, no, the Maryland map is ridiculous.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
in some
New
PA
Jersey's map's
districts.
not terrible, but
Yeah.
Maryland is pretty bad. And actually, I don't know if I said this story, but I think the actual term gerrymandering it comes from a district, and I believe Maryland that was so bad it actually looked like a salamander. So it somehow it turned into that gerrymandering term and slogan. So a little political history, fun,
You know,
some
that
political
makes
fun history
sense.
there. Yeah, it was pretty bad because I remember seeing it in college. But I think another reason that they're kind of pushing for this redistricting is because on generic ballots, Republicans aren't really doing too well either. If you
No,
look
and
at
especially
it,
with the incoming economic downturn, it'll definitely hurt them massively.
not
I
yeah. I
think
mean,
that's what they're bracing for even more than anything, even ahead of the already bad polling numbers.
it's so interesting how like the Democrats are negative 33, I think now, 32,
Deep
like
in
they're
the red.
deep in the red on approval ratings, but on generic ballot, most Americans would vote for them. I think it's a 5.3 to 43% difference. So that's 2.3 points that Democrats are currently leading as of these polls are from today.
You
So
know, I'd vote for any
that's
Democrat candidate that doesn't take money from APAC. You know
right.
what I mean? Over a
But
Republican
soon I
candidate
do
all
believe
day.
like Republicans, what they'll try to do is obviously try to shine light onto those Democrats that do cozy up to Israel, innocents or even influencers that are conservative or that conservative leading will start to do that as well. Like we saw with Andrew Tate when he got out of jail. Now he's actually all for Israel and actually saying, I think what was the line is Israel making you fat or something like that. But that just goes to show you how far like they'll go to be able to turn in like conservative voices for support of Israel to bring in voters to turn their Republican voters really to turn their sentiment on will turn sentiment positively for Israel because they understand that it's going down the toilet within every day, week, a month, and by the year I can imagine it being down almost 50-60%, honestly.
You know, I'm all down for this massive hit to support for Israel, and I do think that the future of American politics doesn't involve an alliance with Israel. You know, I think that after 30 years of war in the
Not at all.
Middle East, we've gotten 30 years worth of people who are absolutely sick of the Middle East.
Yeah,
And I know that
completely.
one of the most common things people like to talk about when it comes to Israel as a perform, there's a lot of Israeli propaganda out there, you know, and one of the big ones is that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. One, Turkey exists. Two, the other countries exist like Egypt. That's North Africa, though, if you want to be technical. But three, Israel literally has a Jewish supremacy clause, as in the birthright clause. So meaning every Jew is can be a citizen of Israel, and Jews are considered a top priority in the Israeli landscape. That alone takes away the ability to call yourself democracy because you
Literally.
already have a class of citizen that's above other classes of citizen. And in Israel, it's also important to know you can get different forms of IDs that allow you to go to different areas of Israel. Some people can't go to certain areas. If you have a Jewish Israeli ID, you get full access to the entire Israeli country. If you have a Palestinian Christian ID, you get extremely limited to where you can go and what you can do. If you
Yep.
have if you have an Arabic Israeli identity, you get limited, you get restricted less than the Palestinian Christian or Muslim, but you still get restricted more than the Jewish Israeli. So you can't call a country a democracy when there's a clear, quite literally constitutionally embedded favorability towards a certain ethnic group. And that's why people argue that Israel is a Zionist country, an ethno supremacist country, because quite literally it's about Israeli Jewish supremacy. You
Literally.
can argue all day that it's about, it's not about Jewish supremacy. It's not, because they sterilized Ethiopian Jews because they didn't like them. You know what I mean? It's all about Israeli Jews. It's not, it's a specific kind of Jew that they want to put up in this light as as we can see in the propaganda in Israel, as the chosen people.
Yeah.
And we really see that propaganda take effect. And we see a lot of people in America and a lot of American Jews who think that's kind of crazy. You know what
No.
I mean? Like, if this, I've talked to a few Jewish people who even said, like, I've been conflicted with my faith about this all, because I can't believe these people share the same faith as I do. And it's a normal thing to think when you're exposed to such wicked levels of malicious evil. I remember being younger thinking the same thing, like, how do me and these, terrorists in the Middle East or in Africa share the same religion that I do? And it's just
Right.
that a lot of people are very corrupt or malicious or just lost.
Mhm.
And, it's tough to discern which one those are.
Right.
And,
Especially being over there too, you're embedded into it. Like if
oh, yeah,
you're like
especially
you
when you
never
grow
come
up
out
in it.
because like you obviously you're like let's get like if you were born in Israel and you see all of these things happening in favor of Israel, you're obviously like let's go hoorah X Y and Z. But if you're on this side, obviously you're gonna have that sentiment that you're like what's going on? Like are these
Yeah.
the same people that read the same scripture? Do the same things that I do? And you start to question yourself, your faith in a way, because you see all of the heinous crimes and acts
And it's
that are
just like
being done,
rubbed off and denied.
rubbed off in the night, like nothing ever happened. Like
And I,
no one is talking about those journalists, I believe anymore, that were literally slaughtered by Israel. No one is talking
more
about
than both World Wars and Vietnam War and Korean War combined in 2 years. And what I really think is also important to note is that what the thing actually just slipped my mind. It was about the Israeli war crimes. But what I wanted to add as well, aside from that though, is that when Israel has this big idea of, as we mentioned earlier, brainwashing its citizens essentially, and brainwashing other people across the country and across the world. And that's why we have such a large Judeo-Christian mentality and amongst a lot of Christians in America, is that, well, the Bible quite literally tells us to, bless Israel or we will be cursed, XYZ. And I really think that what that leads to is, amongst a lot of people, they don't find such answers satisfactory. So it's like, are we really going to support these war crimes because of this and nothing more? Am I really going to support sending billions of my
right.
country's dollars for this and nothing more? There's a difference between having faith in God and then that. And I think that Israel has really overstepped their hand with this, with their Christian support, because you don't, well, how's the saying go, don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think Israel's been the hand that feeds them, which is America. And I don't think they
Oh
meant
yeah,
to bite it.
they've bitten our hands so many times.
Yeah, I don't
Ridiculous.
think they meant it to be clear they bit our hand, but I think that the media was willing to overlook the hand biting because they were benefiting from it. But
Right.
once we have independent media coming in, it's just all been coming to light. And in the last 5 years, we've literally seen support for Israel more than support against Israel more than double in 5 years, which is a very quick rate in the historical scale of the last 50 years. And I really do think that in the next 20, 30 years, Israel itself has even said, there's been a few posts about it in the Times of Israel, they're going to look to Asia and more for like India and such for their partnerships. And I don't think that I don't think China would be
No, not at
interested
all.
in
Why would
partnering
they?
up with Israel,
Why?
really. Why would
Exactly. Why
they?
would
Yeah,
they be
exactly.
interested in, having to deal with, Israel's, almost imperialistic mind of thinking, when China's already basically like that themselves. Like, if anything, China would look
Yeah,
to take over, Israel if it could. And
absolutely. I
would
agree.
add that to Russia then. So like I would not think at all that China would be interested in dealing with
I
India. I
think
could see
I think
probably
the only
maybe more
yeah,
just
I would
because
say I
of the
think the
whole
only country in Asia that
India
would really take their
Pakistan
side
like
would be
situation.
India.
I could see a little bit there. Like India could use Israel, pseudo the United States as a way to get to Pakistan. Realistically, I could that's something that could be viable as a partnership
Yeah,
if they are looking to turn the other side of the world for partnerships. Now you're also saying talking about Netanyahu overextending his hand. Um, there was some recent news in domestically in the home front. DC, like looking at DC and other states, the Home Rule Act. Have you heard about that?
oh yeah,
So
I have. I was just in DC like literally a few days before this is all was
really,
announced.
okay.
Yeah, I was there for an
Oh,
anime
sweet.
convention.
Nice,
It was a
nice,
fun time.
nice. So yeah, Trump declared DC crime emergency on August 11th, actually. So yesterday, invoking Home Rule Section 740 for federal control of police National Guard for 30 days. And funny enough, not really funny enough, but DC doesn't have a governor for individuals. It is a district. It is not a state. Um,
Yeah,
so technically, on the basis, its governor is, in all regards, Congress in a sense. They only have a mayor.
yeah,
So realistically, the mayor, did go through all of their legal strategies and playbooks that they could use to try to, stop or even stall the National Guard and or the police being federalized, but they have nothing that they can do. There's
not much you can do.
nothing
I bet.
that they can do.
Yeah.
This is going to happen, and he's looking at other cities as well, even New York and Chicago.
I don't think that'll happen, but at the
Nope.
same time, I do think it'll happen. You know what I mean? I'm like, I could see him just sending the National Guard there, arresting a bunch of crackheads and young people, and then just saying, "All right, city has been, what's the word? What's something that's Trump-esque? The city has been blessed with
Yeah,
freedom
something
and
like that.
liberty. The good people of New York can now
The,
live in
the city
peace
can
because
now see
I,
the
Donald
Golden
Trump, have
Age.
now saved them all from the great parasite of New York City, Mamdani and his crackhead crew." Some bullshit like that,
Yeah,
you
I
know
mean,
what I mean?
I just don't see really the need to do that. Like, I feel like having
Especially with crime rates
crime
falling,
rate's falling.
this is
Like,
the
don't
thing.
do it by force. Do it by legislative matters that can actually provide support to these individuals and actually get them off the streets. Forcibly trying to remove them, then where are you going to put them? Where are you thinking about putting? What facilities are you thinking about putting these individuals in? Once you try and force them out of the states, like into just jails, and now we're paying additional taxpayer dollars to house these individuals and for who knows how long. So it's another tax burden that comes from the individuals that are within those states or federally, if it ends up being federal jails that they're put into. So it's like, what's
Yeah.
really going on here? It's a more aggressive tactic. It should be a more rehabilitative tactic in a sense. Get these individuals the care and supports that they need and can put them on the right path. Whether it's economic support, whether it's mental health support, or whether it's drug abuse support as well. Um, this is not how a president should be looking at cities when it comes to crime in this perspective. You can be tough on crime, but this is just going a whole darker view of that, basically, that I really think of. And this authoritarian regime is something that he's now, I would say, almost wearing on his sleeve that is starting to become something from him getting the 15% from NVIDIA, the Supreme Court cases, and also now the Home Rule Act, the immunity ruling by the Supreme Court. All these things are leading to almost his administration being equal to that definition in a way. It's getting there.
Yeah, it's pretty authoritative, but I will add this. I do agree that it's going to cost taxpayer money to have the institutions or to pay the private institutions to take on these individuals, take care of them. But when it After living in Baltimore for a while, I've talked to a few homeless people, talked to a few people who are, addicted to drugs and living on the street. And, I've known addicts as well. Addiction isn't easy. And a lot of these people, if you are to take them away from this bad landscape, this bad mentality, they likely will relapse. And, it's fairly normal. Relapsing is very easy to do. And I really do think that if you want to actually help the homeless people who are, drug addicted in America, you quite literally need to take them from where they
Yeah,
are out of their drug den and put them in a place. And this is going to be controversial, and I understand why, but you need to quite literally force them out of a certain area, keep them in a certain area so they can't use drugs, so they go through withdrawal and give them the support system and the
yeah,
help
I
they
completely
need.
agree. They
Now, I
should be
really
rounded up in a
now,
sense.
I honestly, my ideal solution to this, as of right now, if I may learn more and change my mind, but I really, sorry, my cat was making noise, but I really think the ideal situation for this all is there's a lot of homeless people who just see, when you're drug addicted and down on your luck like that, all you think about is how
Right,
worthless you are. You know what I mean? The reason why you're doing drugs is because you don't want to live day to day. You're thinking, well, this is miserable.
right.
Let's
Let's
go
just try
smoke
to feel
crack so I
better or
don't have to
something.
deal with
Yeah,
this actually all.
keep chasing,
Try to feel
keep
better. Yeah,
chasing.
there's a saying that I like. Yeah, there's a saying that I like. People narcotize themselves to escape reality, and it's a fairly accurate thing
Fairly.
to say. And so these people, if you allow them to keep continuing to do these issues, the things that are making them so weak, drug use, and it's going to keep. No matter what you do, you can throw them $1 million, they'd spend
Right.
$1 million
Yep.
on crack. And that's not my way of saying these people are unsavable. It's not. It's my way of saying these people are in such an unhealthy state of mind, an unhealthy state of spirit, unhealthy state of physicality, that it is just what their body goes to, their mind goes to, because it's just what makes them feel comfortable because they're down that bad. So I will say I agree with the idea of taking the homeless and putting them in areas where they're forced away from drugs and given support. And then I think these people should be put to labor, physical labor, XYZ, until they've proven they can handle themselves. If the state's going to be taking care of these people, I think they should give some
So
benefit to
why
the
not have
state.
them do? So
Then,
this was actually some legislation I've talked to my friend before that I like became president. It would be
yeah,
for homeless people, and yes, you'd say recovering drug addicts. Let's go 2 months, 3 months clean. Let's say, or maybe let's
that's
let's
a fair
go
amount of time.
6 to 12 months. We'll go. That seems fair. That
Yeah, I'll say you need a
people
few
can
months
probably
to get that
suggest that
confidence up
like
after
digest that
stopping.
much. But basically, having those individuals be at the gas stations. New Jersey is one of the only
Yeah,
states.
the New
New
Jersey
Jersey is the
work.
only one of the only states. Like you can put measures in place to where you're not having them steal or things of that nature, or have them fall back into their habits, basically. So so it's like
Here's the
things
thing, yeah,
like that.
most
Like,
drug users
no,
aren't
they're
bad
not bad
people.
people. They just unfortunately had bad circumstances that, or had bad moments that led them to the life that they unfortunately had, or even had
Yeah,
bad
being homeless
guidance,
and or
or
a
even had bad
crackhead.
guidance as well. Probably like a bad older brother
Yeah,
that let them do it, or bad parents that let them do it nonchalantly, or would do it with them. You know what I mean? So
drugs are
yeah,
always
it's
a
always a
sad
sad
story, man.
story, but I think
Always.
that's how you do it. You can take them out of the cities, but I think having to nationalize the you know the National Guard and then the state's police as well. That's going way too
No
far.
reason.
You could just speak with all
I
the
agree. I
governors
agree.
and just tell them, this is an initiative that we are going to do. You're going to have you either through state executive orders or through past legislation, let me know what way your state can get it done, and this is the plan, and this is what it's we're moving them out, putting money in to rehabilitate them, but then what we get out of it is putting them into the workspace and jobs that are failing and dying as well. Realistically, they can go into certain areas,
Yeah.
maybe manufacturing, learn um, vocational skills or things of that nature, just almost how individuals in jail do as well. So it's kind of like that same
Yeah.
scenario, but we're like not hauling them in jail because I feel like they technically have done nothing wrong in a sense. Yes,
It's a
doing the
victimless crime.
right.
They themselves are the
Like,
only
yes, doing the
victim.
drug
You
is
know what I
probably
mean?
illegal, of course, but they're not. They're hurting themselves, not technically hurting anyone compared to individuals that are
Yeah.
incarcerated in jail. And to kind of go a little to go to our next little tidbit here, individuals in jail that should actually be, I think there should be a way harder push now, even more for individuals who are in jail for marijuana related cases. I don't know if you saw that Trump is rescheduling um, marijuana actually.
I saw that to Schedule
Yep.
3 now.
So yeah, the DEA rule is on has been on hold since last March. So, it's going to be interesting to see if they actually go through with it. I mean, that would be great. It would allow pharmacies to sell, marijuana and not just in these, gosh, what do they call them again? Dispensaries. My gosh, I had a blank for a second. Yeah, dispensaries.
Dispose,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And Dispose will start being able to take
Yeah,
card
exactly.
instead of just taking cash.
Exactly. So it
Yeah.
opens it up for a lot. So I actually am pretty, excited for this. I really hope a lot of states now go further with their prison reform legislation when it comes to incarcerated individuals, especially on marijuana. Because I know in Pennsylvania for a while when I was there, like once you got a drug related charge, you basically lost almost right to vote in many cases. And we were trying to push a law to have that retroactively restored if the law passed only for small like marijuana cases of that nature, and obviously did not pass. But those
Yeah.
are the type of things that I like to see because now, yes, we are not making it a scientifically bad looked at thing. So now let's make it acceptable within society, and now let's let these individuals come out of the prison and actually whether it's work in dispensaries or work in that industry or something of that nature. I feel like it's been everyone glamorizing it while these individuals are still rotting in jail and most likely being as I was saying earlier counted in the Republican states census even though they can't even vote.
That's the craziest thing to me, even though they can't vote. And they would vote most likely blue. They and what I do want to add is I agree with a lot of that. The rehabilitation and reassimilation into
It's so
society
key.
is key. And a lot of these criminals and a lot of these drug users and homeless who have been out on the outskirts of society for so long really struggle with the reintegration of it. And that's why I think that making them learn the skills needed is needed. And I hate to say the word need making them do it, but when somebody's got lost control of their own self, I do think the state should do something to help them out. And
Yeah, to a
when just
certain
giving them the
degree,
resources and
like you should be able to get the resources that are adequate enough through study best practices to be able to get you back on your feet. It shouldn't be a complete
I mean
outright
that's what
handout in a sense, but it should be
yeah,
able to get you your
and that's why I
boots to
said
pull up. Your well, get you your bootstraps to pull up your boots. Basically, that's what every American should be able to have. The access to realistically, whether they're at the top of the food
yeah.
chain or at the bottom. You should be able to have certain supports when you are, in rock bottom situations to where you can get back on your feet realistically.
And that's why I mentioned earlier that it's definitely a bit controversial because it brings up the question like how forceful should the government be with this? The fact is like yes, these people aren't hurting anybody, but we don't want people using drugs on our streets. We don't want people sleeping on our streets, and it's not like and if we're forcing them off the streets because we find it repulsive, that's one thing. If we're forcing them off the streets because we want to clean them up, that's a total in rehabilitate. That's a completely different
Right.
thing. You know what I
Because
mean?
it's just like what kind of Trump was saying, like you can't, you won't invest. Companies won't invest into a city if it looks bad, looks homeless, looks
If
worn
they
out,
think their workers will be unsafe.
right, exactly. It's something that I learned in my state and local government class, the broken window theory, basically. So if
Yeah.
you have an apartment building, an old storefront, or an old structure of that nature has broken windows, that structure, if not upkept or revitalized, will continue to spread to other businesses. You will see more businesses that are shuttered, more with the wood boards out front, more broken glass from windows and things of that nature, and that'll be throughout the whole community. So that's a little bit kind of what you see when I used to drive into Philly sometimes. Actually, a
The
lot of
hood.
burn up stores and so forth. It was right in the Germantown area, but yeah, there would be a lot of board up stores. I definitely hope it is better now since I've last worked in that district. But I do hope we don't start to see this in other cities because it's only going to bring down more competition for other businesses wanting to come in and do things, whether it's at New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, or DC, realistically. So he's got the right
Yeah.
idea, but I think he's just going about it the wrong way.
The wrong execution.
Yeah, wrong execution on it. There's 100. I feel like if he got the right people in the room, he could come up with a sensible way that's not forcible or that puts him in a bad dictatorship like view that he's able to get his mission across here, because it's
Yeah.
really not all that terrible. It makes sense um, realistically when you look at it, because a lot of states do have very high um, homeless populations.
Yeah, no, I mean, dude, just walking around Baltimore, I see homeless people constantly. And considering the fact that it's a city with hundreds of thousands, and I only see like I'd say a dozen or more, a dozen or so generally, it's not an amount that you would say like, oh, large amounts of the city are homeless, but it's an amount that you see that and you think, I've seen a homeless person every other block, every
Right.
3 blocks. And just as you said earlier with the broken window theory, I mean, it was a good comparison. Like you drive through Baltimore, you see places that have boarded up windows, and then the more
Right.
you go, the more houses that are boarded up, the less people that live there, the worse it
Mhm.
looks, the worse it is, and it really is a real thing. And the parts in Baltimore, a lot of the you'll see more homeless people congregate in certain areas because of that broken window theory. Because it's like, all right, well, these people are over here drinking their night away. I don't feel bad about going over here in the similar spot and just sleeping the night away or smoking
Right.
crack the night
Yeah.
away.
Hmm.
And I mean, in my where I used to live in Baltimore, there was quite literally there would be 3 people who would just be in the park. There was like a tiny park, literally just like the size of a almost like a street, and they would just drink in the park all night until they fell asleep, and then they wake up in the morning and like go somewhere. And, and I remember where I lived there then, I'd see a lot more homeless people than where I live now. And my thought was always because either one of two things: either they feel more comfortable doing it in this area because there's other people doing the same things,
Hmm.
or there's just more homeless people in this area. But then I thought, well, if they're homeless, they can go quite literally anywhere. So why are they congregating more here in the same location? And it's the broken window theory.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the domestic landscape is really going to look like if he really goes into DC like this, goes into New York, especially New York, and especially
I mean, he's just
Chicago.
targeting these blue states. Who knows? He's probably just trying
Basically,
to
it is.
deport people so they don't vote in 2026.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really the game of it in a sense, and it's still on that overarching. I would say the election was rigged. I would think in a sense, because he's going after the illegal immigrants who they Republicans tout voted in the election and so forth. So he's going at what he's always said he was going to go after. Realistically, it's not something that we should kind of be surprised about. More is shock and awe to how he's going about it and how allowing members of Congress are kind of letting this happen across the
Yeah.
board. Across
The
the board.
and with that said, I think it's important to segue that also into the last topic of the day, and that's really the polls and what they've
Yeah.
been looking like. Now, Mikhail, you've been looking at the polls a bit more than I have in this last few days because I've been busy. How have things been looking amongst the Democrats and Republicans in going into the presidential outlook? What his approval and disapproval has been.
So I mean, well, I mean, realistically, as Trump can't run for president, but if he did, his approval rating is sitting at about like a 46 right now overall. So he's doing decent, I would say, overall approval
Yeah,
rating. Not too bad. It is going down more and more as the weeks go. as I was saying earlier,
Yep.
generic ballot wise, Democrats are basically gaining. The more that Trump's approval ratings go up, the more that the generic ballot for Democrats is going up as well, which is kind of interesting in a sense. It's kind of hard to connect those two together. How one rising
It is
and
interesting.
their popularity is going down as well. But at the leading of the pack is they have conservatives have been pushing JD Vance and Marco Rubio to possibly be that 2028 ticket, which I think would be a smash hit for the Republican Party. I know Steve Bannon has said that he is also thinking about throwing his hat into the ring in the Republican Party um, presidential race. But for the Democrats, Newsom is definitely gaining a lot more ground. He's been at
He's gonna
about
be the
like
number
14,
one man.
16%. AOC is right behind him as well. Buttigieg, sorry, he's right below AOC, and then you
Pete
have
say a whole lot of nothing, Buttigieg. I'm sorry,
yeah,
he's one of my
basically,
least favorite politicians.
and then you have Bashir polling at around 5% ish. So I think that Newsom is obviously going to be the lead candidate for the Democratic Party. I believe he is. He's not the Trump of the Democratic Party, but
He's
he's
like the
just
white
when you look
Obama.
at it.
The
I
white
don't know.
Obama is the way I'll refer to him, to be honest. Like he's
Maybe.
not. He's fairly moderate. He's got the look of like the clean, young
Yeah,
politician. He speaks fairly well, and
and he can take
Obama was a
hits. I
senator.
like his
So
scrappiness in a sense. I think that's what the Democrats need, and I really hope that that's something that if he is, um, run for president, is put in that level of limelight and does well polling wise, and does more
yeah,
electorally wise, and ends up winning in 2028. I hope that's one thing that the Democrats can learn, that not only do you have to be sensible and pragmatic about your policies, but also you have to be able to stand and fight for when you have to, realistically, like how the Texas redistricting started. Newsom was one of the first states to say, no, if you guys start doing this, we are going to be doing the same thing. Like, we're not going
yeah,
to sit here and just let you guys, redistrict your state to benefit your party when, California has way more delegates than Texas, as well as has a larger economy than Texas as well, and a larger economy than most worlds. I mean, most
yeah.
countries, honestly.
California, I think if it was his own country, would have the sixth largest
Yeah, I think it was like
GDP
either
in the
sixth or
world if it
fifth,
was
which
its
is
own
like pretty
country.
insane on its own. And also the amount of
When you
money
think
that they
about it,
give
yeah,
federally to the United States, and now as much aid as they give back is pretty lopsided as well.
absolutely. They give a lot
So
more
I really
money.
think him and
I mean, them in New York are the two wealthiest
yeah,
states.
exactly. So I think like either him and AOC would be tricky because AOC is a little bit more of that progressiveness that kind of got Kamala in trouble, I would say. I think he needs a little bit more a moderate individual. I think Bashir, governor of Kentucky, would not be bad, but that's a
You love
two white
Bashir.
male ticket, or you have him and Ossoff, which is
Yeah,
also
it'll be
a
interesting to
two
see.
white male ticket, which Democrats are just gonna have to go with it because that's what's electable currently. Not saying a woman isn't electable, just saying that a man at the front of
It
the
has to be the right
exactly, it has to be
woman.
the right individual that's going to be there, and also you have to have the right messaging and campaign as well. Kamala did not do a great job with her campaign at
At
all, with
all.
getting out to women voters, male voters, blue collar voters, as well as African American voters as well. But yeah, I think either it's going to be, if I was to give a prediction on the two tickets, I would go with obviously Vance at the front of the ticket, Rubio as vice president, and then I would go Newsom, and then honestly, call me crazy, but I'll go Newsom, and I think by 2028 it's going to be much will change to where I think AOC may actually have a shot. I don't know. If I was to put that in betting odds, that's like plus 1,000 right there.
considering the Democrats and how they shoehorned in Kamala as
Exactly.
VP
That's
despite
what I'm
her
saying.
being massively unpopular, I actually think
Like, you know,
they'll get a black man as
you think so?
VP. That's my honest
I
thought.
could be
I don't
clever.
know who it'll be, but I think they take a black Democratic man in Congress over AOC 100%.
We have Raphael Warnock, maybe from Georgia. Same with
Possibly. I mean, because we saw with the Kamala pick, they definitely care about identity politics, and I don't think that I think they learn a little bit of a lesson with the desperation behind identity politics
they have
and
to be
what's wrong with
identity
it.
like ideology. That's why they
Yeah, they
want
got
it.
to have somebody who actually stands up for good values, but also fits the look they're
Not
going
just
for.
saying they're going to stand up
And,
for minorities without actually giving good reasonable and pragmatic plans for it. They'll more talk about like what is your ideology and more in talking. Don't talk to me from a minority standpoint because realistically, there are minorities within America, but at the end of the day, we all are Americans. So that's how
we're all
the light that you should
yeah,
talk to me in a sense. That other layer is a secondary layer that yes, there are
yeah.
minorities that have their issues, that have their problems that they face, whether institutionally or historically that have been embedded into the United States. But we're still all Americans at the end of the day.
And I mean, there's like an important thing that I also want to bring up, and that's just how much the voter confidence in politicians is that a lot of people feel the way of, well, I voted for XYZ politician and nothing changed. I'm not hopeful nor optimistic that anything will change because I haven't seen anything different to show me otherwise. And, I really do think that the Democrats are suffering from that more than anything. Because a lot of people are thinking, well, Biden had 4 years. What changed? Except for my life getting more expensive. Obama had 8 years. We passed the Affordable Care Act, but I really nothing changed. Affordable Care Act through the public marketplace insurance is still expensive for the most people, and on top of that, my life is still expensive. So, we, in my opinion, Republicans are doing much better at the propaganda newscape. And I think it's because they have such a strong base of older voters who watch Fox News
Yeah.
a lot. And, they really take a lot of what they believe from that. And like we mentioned the other day, people really do believe there's no tax on overtime. People
Yeah.
really do believe there's no tax on tips. People really do believe there's no tax on Social Security despite that all clearly being false if you even get paid one of those or just do a quick Google.
Exactly.
And I think it's just really the Democrats either need to step up their propaganda or just step
No,
up
just
their
investigating
action.
the
You know what I
vision.
mean?
Realistically, they need to put it together nice and tight, just kind of how the Republicans did with their Project 2025. So they just need to do the same exact thing. Still nothing out on exactly what that Project 2029 is going to look like from the Democratic Party. But once it does drop, that's going to
It'll be
be
interesting to see.
interesting to really see what's in it, kind of like what strategies they like fully thought on that they think are going to be able to win, honestly. But outside of the propaganda, which you're not going to get here, is propaganda. I think that's the last topic we had for today.
Yeah, that's all I had to
Yeah, we,
say.
we covered a bit here, and always just want to say thank you to our listeners. We value your feedback and listening to our podcast on a weekly basis. Please be sure to listen to our next episode, which will be our first guest special. So we're going to be having a special guest on. I believe we're probably going to be doing an Instagram post revealing the guest tomorrow, and it's going to be a fun conversation. We're going to be talking about some Make America Healthy Again initiatives. This individual has worked in the White House and has had a plethora of experience, state and federal. So, we are excited and we do hope that you're able to join us for that. So, that'll be tomorrow, Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And this is Mikhail Jenkins, your host.
This is Muhammad Alec, your
Thank you for
co-host.
joining for another episode of Behind the Ballot. We'll see you guys tomorrow.